I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Barbarian movies were a staple of the fantasy genre in the 80s. Everyone loves a guy in a furry loincloth, so much so the subgenre became filled with entire franchises, which we'll get to in future episodes. But the one who started them all still reigns supreme, wearing a crown on a troubled brow. I'm talking, of course, about the movie that catapulted Arnold Schwarzenegger into a household name, Conan the Barbarian, the bloody and epic story of the Cimmerian warrior who became a legend and king by his own hand. So come with us now, back to the days of high adventure. Conan came from the mind of writer Robert E. Howard, a writer from Texas who really is the man to thank for much of the sword and sorcery epics in film and story we have today. And while that's an amazing legacy, Howard's life wasn't a happy one. His mother had TB and was ill throughout his childhood, and Robert would have depression and health issues his entire life. But he escaped into stories, becoming a prolific writer himself, and began being published in iconic magazines like Weird Tales. The tales of Conan would come from Howard's lifelong love of adventure stories of all sorts. While still a child, he would start writing stories based around tales of Vikings and faraway lands. Howard created a number of familiar characters when it comes to the fantasy genre. Before Conan, he created another barbarian, Kull, not to be confused with Krull, which we'll get to eventually. It would be one of Kull's stories he'd retooled to become the first Conan tale. Red Sonja would also be a creation of Howard's, who would later be turned into a chainmail-clad warrior with a slightly altered name, Red Sonja, with a J.
Don't be a fool. I don't want to kill you.
Try it.
According to Howard, Conan forced himself into life on the page. Howard told the story of the barbarian appearing behind him while he sat at his desk, holding an axe above his head. Conan told the writer that if he didn't write the stories, he'd kill him. So, Howard worked through the night without daring to turn around. In the daylight, the specter of Conan disappeared, but Howard said he knew the barbarian would return, demanding him continue his work. It would happen that Howard's original Conan stories would all be done over the span of only a couple years. The last Conan story he wrote would happen the same year that Howard would end his own life. He would commit suicide after receiving word that his mother had slipped into a coma she would never awaken from. He was 30 years old. The first film version of Conan the Barbarian would take a while to finally reach the screen, starting in the mid-70s when Edward R. Pressman would finally get the rights in place to make the movie. It was during this same time that a feature film about the world of professional bodybuilding was making the rounds called Pumping Iron, and one of the film's stars caught the eye of Pressman, a man with the last name Schwarzenegger. Oliver Stone came on board to co-write the script for the film. But his script ideas, which set the movie not in a medieval landscape, but a post-apocalyptic wasteland with a lot of mutants — Stone was way into mutants at the time, he said — would have cost $40 million. It was an investment cost no one was willing to take. Eventually, Dino De Laurentiis would co-produce the film with Pressman after a long and unsuccessful try at getting the movie made alone. Director John Milius was brought on board and would also tweak the script that had been penned. Milius was a big Viking fan, just like Robert E. Howard, and he would take the setting out of the future and set it in a world that wasn't quite as far removed from our own history. The budget would also be slashed in half, coming in at around $20 million.
Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women. That is good.
The film starts with Conan already a young boy, and with the epic theme song playing, shows his father creating an amazing sword. Conan's father tells him of the god Crom and the riddle of steel. What follows are the events that make Conan the warrior he is, as Thulsa Doom and his minions ride into Conan's village and slaughter the Cimmerians who live there, along with Conan's father and finally his mother. They take all the children to a place called the Wheel of Pain, a massive mill that the children are chained to and made to turn constantly. It's through this that we see Conan grow into a powerfully muscled figure, ultimately being the last one chained to the wheel and alone being the one to turn it. Conan is then taken to be trained as a fighter, in not only the gladiator pits, but also in the East. Not just a fighter, Conan is shown to learn reading and writing and philosophy, and other things. Eventually, Conan is freed and unsure what to do after a life in servitude. He finds his way thanks to the discovery of a sword, being told a prophecy that he will make himself king by his own hand after warming himself by a randy witch's fire.
A conqueror, a man who would someday be king by his own hand.
Conan searches for Thulsa Doom. He does so with his companions Subutai and Valeria, both skilled warriors and thieves. After killing a massive snake that's part of the Doom cult, the trio are given the task of saving the Princess Yasmina by her father King Osric from Doom himself. This doesn't turn out well for Conan, who winds up captured and nearly dies after being crucified on the Tree of Woe, having left behind his companions to face Doom himself, even though he's fallen in love with Valeria. Before he headed to the Temple of Doom, no, not that one, he meets a wizard who aids him. This is the narrator who has been guiding us on this journey. The same wizard is enlisted by Valeria and Subutai to keep the spirits of death from collecting Conan to take him to the underworld. Valeria knows there will be a price to pay for this, but she is willing to pay it. Conan survives the night thanks to his companions, and they return to the temple to retrieve the princess. When they arrive, it is during an orgy of sex and a rather interesting dinner. We also see that the legends of Doom are most likely true, and he is over 1,000 years old as he transforms into a giant snake. They take the princess after fighting off the guards and Doom's warriors, but Doom himself gets his revenge by serpentoring a snake arrow into Valeria, forcing her to pay the price for her ensuring Conan's survival. She dies in Conan's arms.
Breathe my last breath into your mouth.
Conan gives Valeria a funeral pyre, defying the winds that wouldn't allow any flames to burn there. With a vengeance in his heart, he and his remaining companions prepare for Doom's men to attack. Conan asks Crom to give him the vengeance he seeks in a prayer. And then the battle comes. Valeria appears to Conan, saving his life as a Valkyrie, asking Conan, as she did in the past,
Do you want to live forever?
Doom manages to escape, but not for long. Conan goes back to the temple with the princess to finish him. Conan takes Doom's head, just as the cult leader did with his mother. Only this beheading takes a few whacks of the sword, not just one. Conan leaves with the princess, and we see an image of him from the future, sitting on a throne, worry on his brow, which is wearing the heavy crown of a king, his prophecy fulfilled. But the story for how he becomes king is one for another time. The film was shot in Spain over 5 months. Schwarzenegger was kept as the lead actor. After seeing him, no one else was ever considered. Even though this was the case and Schwarzenegger was a world champion bodybuilder, they wanted him even more fit for the part. He'd be working out for a year and a half prior to shooting, dropping over 25 pounds while training on horses and lifting weights. Sandal Bergbend would be cast as Valeria thanks to her work in All That Jazz and the way she could move thanks to being a dancer. She fit director Milius' idea of what a Valkyrie would look like. As it was, she and Schwarzenegger would wind up doing most of their own stunts during the film. Rounding out the trio would be Jerry Lopez as Subutai, who Milius had worked with on the film Big Wednesday. Lopez wasn't an actor but a surfer. Lopez's voice would be dubbed for the final cut of the film by actor Sab Shimino.
I am Subutai, thief and archer.
Speaking of voices, you probably noticed that Schwarzenegger doesn't have a lot of lines in the film. At the time, his Austrian accent was still quite heavy, and he would go through a lot of voice training, including working with the director. But still, he doesn't speak much in the movie.
Crumb laps with your 4 wins.
And actually, that works in the favor of the character of Conan, who, in the film at least, seems to be more about action showing what he feels and means, rather than words. This is reinforced in the scene where Subutai tells the wizard that he's crying for Conan at Valeria's pyre, because as a Cimmerian, he won't cry.
He won't cry. So I cry for him.
Thulsa Doom was played by the legendary James Earl Jones. Jones's portrayal of the cult leader is coldly terrifying, working perfectly with the snake persona that Doom personifies. The film also utilizes the actor's blue eyes well for Doom's powers of hypnotism. He's an amazing villain, but as always, the nicest guys always play the best villains. During filming, the veteran actor gave Schwarzenegger pointers on acting and helped him learn more about the craft. Mako was cast as the wizard and would also be the narrator for this film and the follow-up. Mako's career was a long one. His voice would be heard in numerous projects over the years. One of his final works would be voicing Splinter in the TMNT movie that would be released a year after his death in 2007. The director didn't want anyone smaller than Schwarzenegger playing opposite him when it came to villains and bad guys, so he cast only actors who were as tall as, if not taller than Schwarzenegger. It made the process difficult, with the Arnold standing over 6 feet tall. but it would lead to the casting of Sven Ole Thorsen as Doom's henchman, Thorgrim. You might know Thorsen better, though, as the unstoppable mall security guard LaForge in Mallrats.
Who's LaForge? You don't know LaForge is? They don't know LaForge is.
Or any number of action films he'd go on to be and part of over the years. In fact, Thorsen would co-star with Schwarzenegger in over a dozen films over the years after Conan. Milius wanted this world to feel real, and something that was very close to our own history, even with all the giant snakes and magic within it. He took the beautiful work of Frank Frazetta and other artists and would use actual ancient locations around Spain to shoot in. For special effects, Conan for the most part was practical. The gouts of blood that would come from battles would be from blood bags strapped to the actors. Animals were used in various scenes, with quite a number of horses falling and doing stunts. One creature who wasn't real was Conan's crucifixion snackable vulture. That was a dummy bird, but it was made from actual bird feathers from a dead vulture that had been applied to it. The large snake that Conan fights and stabs with his sword during the robbery of the Tower of Serpents was a massive 36-foot long and was mechanical. During that fight, we see Subutai shooting arrows into the snake while Conan is fighting it. Those were actual bow shots taken by director John Milius off camera. Composer Basil Polidorius was brought on before filming to score the project. He began by looking at the storyboards and artwork that Milius had put together. It's his thrumming and powerful theme music you hear as the sword is created during the credits and immediately brings to mind the image of the warrior. Polidorius would go on to score other genre films like Flesh and Blood, RoboCop, and Cherry 2000, among many others. There's been a lot of debate on the film in terms of its themes and meanings. There are a number of people who see Conan and see simply a macho-filled tale of blood, breasts, and beasts. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. My friend and yours, Joe Bob Briggs, would agree. But there's actually a lot more going on with Conan the Barbarian. The beginning shots of Conan's father creating the sword is really a metaphor for what happens to Conan. Conan is, for all intents and purposes, the sword. He's shaped by experience and hardened by life. He's honed to a powerful weapon. The riddle of steel is at play here, with Conan possibly being the answer. The riddle of steel's answer is debated to this day, but my take is that one. Crom's gift to man, it would seem, is will and thought. Conan is not an idiot or a creature of pure barbarism. Throughout the film, we see him learning, reading, even covering up his breeding partner from the view of the crowd. He loves Valeria, giving her the Eye of the Serpent, the largest of the jewels they stole, as a show of his devotion. He uses cunning to battle the forces of doom when they are outnumbered by them, and they win. Valeria is also Conan's equal. There's been talk over her being an arm piece for Conan, but that's just not the case. Valeria was planning on robbing the Tower of Snakes herself. She was smart enough to bring rope. She, like Conan, has been alone for a long time in the world, and as she said, they found warmth with each other. She's fearless and she loves him, and that doesn't make her weak. It makes her stronger, and without her, Conan would have died. She's a Valkyrie, and she fought the forces of death and won. Her character would set the blueprint for future warrior women in film and TV. Another part of Conan the Barbarian I really love is how Milius mixed in different religions and cultures within the film to create a style that goes hand in hand with his wish to make the film more realistic. Thulsa Doom's cult has images right out of Sumerian artifacts. There's aspects of Egyptian as well as there being an actual python cult in Africa. Remember when I said that it wasn't that Temple of Doom? Well, funnily enough, Milius also used aspects of the Thagi when creating the cult that worshipped Doom. Eastern philosophy is shown throughout as well as the Viking and Nordic aspects, with the belief in Valhalla and the appearance of Valeria being a Valkyrie after death. Crom was actually named by Howard after a pagan god, Crom Crotch, from Ireland's pre-Christian history. Conan and Subutai discuss their gods, and there's respect for each other's beliefs, even if there's some good-natured ribbing about where their gods live.
That's Crom. Strong in his mountain.
Yeah, my god is greater.
Can you believe a barbarian is able to have a more even-keeled conversation about beliefs than most people you see online these days? Yeah, think about that one. Conan wasn't a blockbuster, but a success when it was released, making back around 4 times its budget. It would be a favorite on video and cable TV, where the film would continue to grow in popularity. Schwarzenegger's place in Hollywood history was secured, as was the beginnings of the rip-offs, knockoffs, and inspired by films that would hit the direct-to-video market over the next many years, as well as movie theaters. The film was supposed to be the first of a series of movies and would have one direct sequel, Conan the Destroyer, which would have a PG rating instead of an R. For the kids, you know? But we'll get to that one in a later episode. Conan himself would be seen again in a number of different types of media, with numerous video games inspired by the stories over the years, such as the current hit game Conan Exiles. There would be a cartoon series called Conan the Adventurer / Conan and the Young Warriors in 1992 and would last 2 seasons. Thanks to the success of the Hercules and Xena series, star Kevin Sorbo would play Howard's creation Cole in a feature film actually. Conan the Adventurer, a live-action TV show, was aired for 1 season in syndication, with Rolf Möller as Conan. It differs in many ways from the film and books it was based on, much like the Beastmaster did. It is notable that it has Red Sonja in an episode with Conan, something that had never happened before or since on film. The feature film Red Sonja would happen in place of a 3rd Conan movie, with Arnold Schwarzenegger starring opposite Brigitte Nielsen in 1985 playing Kalidor, with Sandal Bergman as the villain Queen Gedren. We'll talk about this one later too. In 2011, riding high on Game of Thrones and his portrayal of Khal Drogo, Jason Momoa stepped into the role of Conan. While the film was fun and Momoa was very much Momoa, it couldn't find an audience. Conan wasn't a smiling devil-may-care type as portrayed in this film, and would only make around 2/3 of its budget back on release. People just really wanted Schwarzenegger back as an older and world-weary King Conan, and they may actually get that. Last year, it was announced that Netflix was working on a deal for a Conan the Barbarian TV series. The deal being worked would allow the streaming service to produce not only a live-action series, but animated and feature properties as well. Conan has never gone away in the public eye, with Howard's stories compiled together and still in print, along with the ever-growing fan base of Conan the Barbarian the movie. It can't be stressed enough how big an impact the film has had when it comes to the fantasy genre, and movies in general, thanks to the introduction of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who himself is keeping the legend alive. In January, Schwarzenegger posted a video calling out the attack on the Capitol that happened on January 6th. In the video, he pulled out the Conan sword.
This is the Conan sword. Now here's the thing about swords. The more you temper a sword, the stronger it becomes.
It was a perfect metaphor at a time when we needed it. Wise words from the man who brought a barbarian to life. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.